YouTube going in a moment and be able to tell you guys all about some awesome stuff. In our continuing series, Writer's Lunch, how to continue writing, how to get a book finally actually done, and how to do it well, absolutely. So, in this respect, absolutely, when we're passing November, when a lot of people used to do NaNoWriMo, and entering on into the holidays when, your normal schedule is just so wild and crazy. Let's talk about harnessing inspiration and finding the ways that you can really move forward with your ideas that can absolutely obsess you. Absolutely. And I have a presentation here, but in the meantime, Shannon, as I open this up, do you want to tell people what's going on next week?
Yes, we are going to be talking about scandals from 2025 in the literary and publishing world. So speaking of NaNoWriMo, we all thought it was dead. There may be some updates, but there is certainly a lot that we could talk about regarding its implosion and the big reveals that happened during the springtime about its implosion. So come join us. We're all going to pick some of our favorite scandals, or actually our most horrifying scandals of 2025, and we'll talk about them. You can bring some of your own, and we can chat. It's going to be hopefully a very fun time. I like Earl Grey. I don't know what kind of tea you like, but I suggest you bring it.
This year felt like less scandals, but bigger ones.
Yeah.
The previous year it felt like we had like 20 different things to talk about. Yeah. Cool. So, moving on forward with this. Hi, I'm Sean. I am a editor here with Tomeworks Editing. You can always catch us online, tomeworksedits.com. And basically, we want to talk today about harnessing that inspiration, finding your creativity and keeping with it. Because so many times a lot of people have great ideas, move forward with it until the going gets tough. So that inspirational moment is super important, but at the same time, the follow through is necessary as well. So whether you are a writer who has experienced these kind of moments, or like, oh my gosh, I'm so obsessed with this idea, or you're looking for those eureka moments, let's talk about kind of how that process goes through. So this lecture isn't really about how to get inspired, nor is it about how to write. This is about how to capture those moments that invigorate your mind, that blossom into world building and character creation, and could potentially lead to an amazing novel. Too often, that inspiration is lost in life's daily worries, drowned in side quests and minutiae, or exhausted before producing tangible results. How many times have you had an idea for a story, really wanted to do it, and then life gets in the way, or another story takes its place, and poof, it's gone? How instead of losing the flow before it has chance to run its course, can a eureka moment bear fruit? So the first eureka, but certainly not the first inspirational moment, came courtesy of Archimedes, the Greek mathematician, who, upon stepping into the bath, realized that the volume of the displaced water, the stuff that's spilled out, is equal to the volume of a body submerged in the water. It was about irregular objects. You could always measure, like cubes and stuff like that rather easily, but this is a way to do a strange shaped object, aka a human body in this case, but there are many other out there, of course. Apocryphally, Archimedes jumped out of the bath upon his realization and ran naked through town, exclaiming, Eureka, I have found it, which is also where the word heuristics comes from. His discovery led to greater understanding of density and added to an already impressive list of mathematic and scientific discoveries for him. 3 centuries after Archimedes' life, Plutarch wrote a parody of his Eureka moment, imagining a glutton screaming, I ate it! After having an amazing meal, and then running naked through town, or a gallant man after possessing a woman he desired doing the same while hollering, I kissed her! Before admitting, this is Plutarch, admitting that neither of those events took place, and using the Archimedes story as a metaphor for discovery being greater than worldly pleasure, and the only true reason to ever risk embarrassment to such a degree. Now, if you are so obsessed with an idea, it'll consume your mind entirely. And this is kind of an example of, is this greater than worldly desires? In a way, it feels like it is. You are fully possessed of this idea. And in that, it can grab your mind so much stronger than anything that's tangible, that's visceral for sure. It verges on a addiction, obsession, absolutely. So, here in the 21st century, we know a lot more about how minds work. And probably enough to recognize that Plutarch was, but enough to recognize that Plutarch was probably right about his assertion. Though hedonistic delight is certainly a call for celebration, little else but discovery can enchant the mind to such an obsessive degree. We know today that two or three mental diagnoses are vastly more apt to make such heuristic discoveries or to suffer mental anguish from their loss before coming to fruition. ADHD, autism, and AUDHD, a combination of the two, contribute mightily to a predilection for discovery and exploration. These were first recognized in 1943 for autism, 87 for ADHD, and 2013 for AUDHD. But these medical conditions have been described in part for centuries, and by examining historical figures have been ascribed to such people as Einstein, Mozart, Henry Cavendish, who is that illustration up above, a very eccentric English mathematician and scientific discoverer, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Michelangelo, and Leonardo, too. Lewis Carroll, Andy Warhol, Emily Dickinson, Henry Melville. Oh, Herman Melville, my mistake on that. James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Thomas Edison, George Orwell, Hans Christian Andersen, Franz Kafka, Immanuel Kant, Carl Jung, and Claude Monet. So this goes across creative spectrum for sure. And it is all the different ways that people have been, let's say, more obsessed about things, but also more creative about things, able to get more done in this respect because they have extreme flights of fancy. Emily Dickinson there on the bottom, definitely one who definitely had some issues with dealing with life, but very much put all of her creative energies into amazing poems that she wrote along the way. So,
John, in your research, were
neurotypical.
you able to find, I said, in your research, were you able to find if there was like a statistical likelihood for somebody who's creative to have neurodivergence or, be on the spectrum in some sort of fashion?
I did not find that specifically. I do definitely recognize there are lots of other writers, artists, and creatives over the years that for sure I were able to have great careers and probably were neurotypical, absolutely. But before the invention of these, my discovery of these things, and we'll play this out in the next couple of generations as far as what the definition of ADHD and autism in the greater population as it gets diagnosed more and more has in terms of is somebody yes or no in terms of creative endeavor. But in terms of other things like depression, schizophrenia, much more visible. Conditions that were recognized earlier by doctors, those do occur higher in creatives than in the general population. So this is
Mm.
going to be a discovery in the 21st century to see if these are actually much more prevalent
Like
in
highly
those groups,
represented.
I would
Yeah.
say.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So neurotypical folks very well may discover things, and they might be able to follow through on their discoveries to fruition, but then they don't need any help seizing the Eureka moments, I'd say. If you consider yourself neurotypical and say, hold on a minute, I have creative endeavors, I get extremely into it and have trouble finishing, I get extremely into things and have trouble finishing them, what about me? Then you might want to consider that a lack of diagnosis does not mean a lack of characteristics for neurodivergence. You very well just may be well adjusted and rife with coping mechanisms along the way. There is certainly something neurodivergent about running naked through the streets of Syracuse, awestruck by a scientific revelation, just as there is about being able to contain a fun fact about bugs while hanging out with your friends or spending hours every day writing about the adventures of a bevy of characters trapped on a planet far, far from Earth. If this is kind of the definition, if we go back, if you are obsessively writing on something and enchanted by the idea of doing so, this very well may indicate some things, but we're going to have to look to the future to see if statistically that is part of the creative process. We'll go into the creative process a little bit later as well. So let's begin our examination of your inspirational Eureka moments with a framework towards our understanding of neurodivergence these days. We want to look towards sustaining productivity and focus throughout a project. Now, let's capture that inspiration as thoroughly as possible. Some strategies for that: carry a notebook at all times. In idle moments, small or large, use it to sketch out ideas and observances, and this can be writing, that's sketching, absolutely. Leave yourself voice notes on your phone without care if it is complete or even sensical. Sometimes the mind moves faster than a pen ever could. Feel free to mix drawing and writing in your notebooks, diagramming, illustrating, or collaging to flesh out ideas that aren't completely formed. If you can't make it into sentences, that's fine. It still exists. Document your research path. While they're diving through Wikipedia pages, flipping through YouTube videos, or running maniacally through the library, pulling books from different shelves, that is a record of what you are doing to build this idea. It really can be difficult to watch yourself go down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia and then be like, where did I start? How did this journey happen? How can I track that? And that's that little notebook next to you. You're looking up different articles, you're reading about things, but note what you're doing along the way so that you can retrack what that was. ADHD very much is a disorder of forgetting for sure. And so I'm going to put that in with that happens. It definitely does. Limit social media as much as possible, letting your mind wander creatively instead. If you want to have those eureka moments, you're going to have to experience boredom. And the way that we today get all sorts of dopamine from social media, it hijacks and pushes to the side the ability to find your own inspiration. Each little thing, each cool video that you watch is absolutely taking away from your ability to find this on your own. Going out and discovering things is different than having them fed to you in a way. Cory Doctorow has some great things out there about the dopamine push that especially newer things like shorts and TikTok and stuff can really push the mind towards not self-analyzing things. Absolutely. After that, recognition of a eureka moment is important. As Marie Kondo might say, if it inspires you, keep it. One revelation typically leads to another, and a eureka moment may be obscured by other moments that surround it. Capitalizing on that central inspiration of your creative journey can be difficult, but intervening at this stage to prioritize longevity can alleviate problems down the road with discarding uninspiring ideas. This goes back to that notebook again, can be notes on your phone, whatever, but keeping a list of momentary ideas in a journal and determining a time period to revisit them. Am I going to look back at this list after a week, after a month, and choosing the ones that inspire joy or ferocity for sure is a good way to watch those little things that inspire the mind and then I kind of get lost in the sauce. I just to keep them all in the same place. After that, I'm trying to expand on each one from a line or a snippet to a scene. Just a few sentences. This can definitely be kind of that prompt way of looking at just you're going to do a little bit more and see how this idea really grows within you if you're writing more about it. You'll want to eliminate alternatives at this point till you're left with one or two to explore further. Great, absolutely. You have two or three that when you wrote it out into a scene, into a longer thing, that you're able to say, I want to work more on that. Pick the ones that are the strongest. Research and write longer works about your remaining ideas. They can be stories, artworks, research documents, outlines. It doesn't have to directly be, I'm going to jump into writing the story. Sometimes you're just doing world building, absolutely. And you're seeing what of these can drive you on those Wikipedia rabbit holes, can drive you further towards looking at more and more different things out there. Now you're going to see which one carries you the furthest in exploration. Note how long that goes for. Are you really into this for hours, for days, for weeks? This inspirational moment, especially in a neurodivergent view of looking at things, can really extend for a long period of time where in those idle moments, keep your phone down, you are able to just kind of daydream and fall into them. Now you've settled in on an idea to explore. Congratulations. For some of this experience, for some, this experience may feel automatic and like you have no choice in the matter. The flow of inspiration may seem just perfect. This can be a sign of neurodivergence untamed. Through practice, trial, and error, these tendencies can be harnessed to more productive aims. If you find yourself unable to break away from the first idea, try and split it into pieces. If you're looking at, I only have one thing on my list, I 100% want to write about this. Cool. What are a few different aspects of it to where you can break that into different parts or different characters that you can then focus on? Once these ideas start to flow, they can have many entry points. Where do you want to write about? When do you want to write about? What instance, what plot are you interested in? And those can be different ones to think of as well. When an idea grips you firmly, whether a character or a storyline, it's more than possible that you may be missing out on ideas that could be worthwhile if only given the chance. If you're completely obsessed with one thing and are unable to kind of look at other possibilities that are coming up, ideas in your life, you might be missing out on something that's amazing. And it could be just your mind's tendency to grab on the first thing, and that is more important than anything else. So, broadening that, trying to break this up into you're allowed to have different ideas over different days. You don't have to grab one and stick with that. No choice otherwise. That burnout happens when you're pushing through and trying to make an idea work that might be a dead end. So, here we are pushing through the first stage. What's that eureka moment? Where are you inspired? Where are you getting ideas from? The creative process, as defined by Danish philosopher K.E. Logstrup and subsequently elaborated upon by cognitive psychologists, has five stages. Looked at that first one, that inspiration, you've now arrived at stage two, incubation. This is where the cooking happens. You're simmering and whirling in art. This is where all your research floats in and out of the subconscious mind. This is where that notebook of ideas, those notes that you're putting in your phone, those voice notes you're leaving for yourself. Note to self, what would a story be like of this character at the age of 15? What if the airships in this world were actually powered by tiny mice? Um, just letting these ideas simmer and flow without actually working on it. This is where novel connections happen without your thinking and in your imagination network. You could be at work. Let's say you're a cook in a restaurant. You are chopping vegetables and something pops into your head. It's a constellation of connections happening in the back of your mind. You're not consciously trying to work on it at this stage. This is where you're in a daydreamer mode. Taking walks is a big thing. When looking at all these neurodivergent figures through history, it's very interesting to find things like Immanuel Kant used to take a walk through the streets of, I'm going to say he was in Vienna. I could be wrong. And would take it exactly at the same time of day, at the same pace, every single day. And in this, he was working through ideas in his head. There are lots of things to be said for routine or doing something that takes up just a portion of your conscious mind so that the rest can kind of flow off and do other things. You're meditating without realizing it. And this highly imaginative network is at play. This is why you hold your ideas close to your heart and explore all of them. This incubation can last longer than any other stage. It's important not to give up at this point. Trust the process and know that your project still exists in the back of your mind. Depression can occur, and you may feel listless or disinterested in your life. This is part of the process. You might not be interested in your idea and also not interested in going to work. But there is something going on in the back of your brain, and you want to keep up with your project during this incubation period. Even if you flip open that notebook and go, ah, I don't want to work on that. Flip it open and write 3 words. Perfectly fine. Rereading your work, pushing through disinterest to make progress, and switching media. Are you working on art? Maybe you should write. Are you working on writing? Maybe you should do art. To explore other aspects of your idea can reinvigorate this process and move your mind on to the next stage. Even if you're revisiting your work and it doesn't inspire you to pick it back up, don't let that dissuade you from trying it again later. It will happen. This can literally take weeks or months for sure. What do we have here? Checking on the. Oh, that's very fun. I looking at talk about cats in the chat for sure. So we're at the ad incubation stage. And then at some point, the wheels start to turn again. Finally, we've arrived at stage 3. May have felt like the inspiration was a eureka moment, but if we can push through that incubation period when it feels like it's latent, you'll find that an even greater inspirational eureka moment awaits. This is the insight, the aha moment. It might feel like Archimedes in the bath was sitting in there and immediately realized, oh, look, I can displace volume and figure out the total volume right there. He was probably beforehand thinking of a solution to the problem, unable to come up with a solution to the problem, and then boom, something happened, and that eureka moment really happens then. I may have been talking about this as if those moments that inspire you are the eureka moments. Sure, they are. But once you have explored a few different versions of this, once you've gone through a latent period, there can definitely be a stronger eureka moment later. This time, the light bulbs come on, all of them. Classically, this is what we think of as being creative. Insight is where creativity, awe, and pragmatism come together. You've already prepped a bit of ideas. You've already decided, there's a few different aspects of this problem I could look at. And that aha moment cannot be willed. It naturally unfolds and comes into light. This is where no matter how much you push forward, it's going to have to come naturally. It's part of the mental process that leads to creative expression. It's magic. That's the best I can say. Science beyond our understanding is magic. So, boom, you get a creative moment. This can happen at the most inopportune times, but if you harness it, it will bear fruit. So, this is the time to let your idea grow into a story. You may feel invigorated, entranced, obsessed with bringing your idea to fruition, but pace yourself. Remember to take care of your basic life needs, to meet your obligations to work, family, and friends, and to pace yourself. The realization that the chase is back on, the pursuit of your creative endeavor has begun again, can be a momentary phase, but it's the time to cash in on all the work that you've done before and be excited for the work ahead of you. All right, here I have Mozart up in the corner, was definitely a strange character for sure, and in his history would go into obsessive phases about, writing all through the night, all through the day, and being unable to stop the music happening in his head, basically. There are extreme examples of people using what I would say is neurodivergent tendencies to get a result out of it, but don't crash your life based on it. If you are already famous and you have all the money that you need to, perfectly fine, crash out on it. Otherwise, we're going to have to all live in the real world here. Remember that original slew of ideas that came before the explorations of aspects of your work that you wrote down before the incubation period set in? Now is your time to revisit those ideas and see what best fits your creative energy. Evaluation is when you're going to review and explore your originality. You can ask yourself, is this new idea? The synthesis of your ideas emerge, and you begin to share your ideas with others. This is where a social network really helps. That idea of being completely obsessed about something, isolating yourself and working on it, sometimes can mean that you're reinventing the wheel. You do need to get out and speak with others about your idea, even if it is friends and family and they're all going to be super positive about it. Absolutely. You just need a little reality check on that. Here, you need to know that no one, not anyone, can create like you. This is your singular vision here. Trust that your creative vision is worth sharing and that no one, not anyone, has your voice, that it in itself is original and worthwhile. Andy Warhol, an example right here, a very eccentric person before my what he would have been diagnosed with as a child was a thing, and just the sheer number of paintings that he did by using processes that were faster and faster and faster in order to get out more stuff pushed him for sure to eliminate these alternatives in the real world. You don't need to see where things are going and then have a difficult time what can I say? Bringing them to fruition. If you can write little flash pieces about them and try to get those published. If you can write short stories about different aspects of your idea and get those published. Try to push it out there, share with peers, show it to people, and see what gets traction in the real world. Here we are when it's time to put the pedal to the metal. Whether you're still feeling inspired and you're driven by this idea, or you're pushing through to get each word out, this is where your idea becomes reality. The bloom is off the rose eventually, and you'll need to fight through distraction, disinterest, as well as new ideas popping up to keep on task. So when we're in the elaboration stage, this is the perspiration stage, where you roll up your sleeves and get to work. If you want to write a novel, this is a big, big project. This is where the vision of creativity comes to light. It may take some time as you work through and create your vision. Allow yourself to be totally immersed in creative mind space. In the thick of this, you'll be challenged, doubt yourself, and go beyond your fears. Make the conscious choice to trust that what you're offering is going to land with readers and envision connecting with them through the page. You want to think about the audience at this point. It was personal, it was very much of yours. Now you want to share it with others. Keep on going, create, and share your creative vision. It may take a lot of sweat, tears, and oh, I hate that last word, years. It definitely can take many cycles of inspiration, latent period, getting to the actual work of it again and again and again to have a project finally come to fruition. So along the way, we're at this. We are inspired. We have a great idea. We are full of vigor doing it. And how do you actually push it through? For sure, you pace yourself. Break up your expanded idea into manageable portions and don't concentrate too heavily on one of them. If your goal is a novel, outline first. I do know that people out there are pantsers. Absolutely, that's great. You can try and write an entire novel all the way through, but if you don't get there, that's perfectly fine. I've just written 3 or 4 short stories. If you can, outline first. This will spark those different ideas to it and give you a set of smaller goals, chapters to achieve. Reward yourself. And this goes to all the strategies people were talking about during NaNoWriMo when it was a thing. If you're trying to write 50,000 words in a month, you need something along the way to keep you going. And that can be weekly, that can be daily, just depends on what you're able to do. Whether it's a meal out, a small gift to yourself, or a much needed time off, small rewards can help you push through. Adding new ideas to the previous list that you've been keeping. Document them, but let the compulsion to work on them wait. I got a 4A in here as well, because sometimes if keeping on task isn't working, you're just losing the strength to move forward with this idea. Switch to that new idea. Perfectly fine. Work on that for a little while. Let that wear itself out. Some people definitely are working on two or three projects at the same time. It depends on how your mind works. Let it flow as long as it's going to happen, and then dive into another. If an idea doesn't hold your attention long enough, make it smaller. If you aspire to write a novel, but you can't really get there with the life situation that you're in, with the inspiration and amount of time that your mind can hold something together, make it smaller. Novel could just be a short story. A side character in one story can become the main POV for another. World building can be its own reward. I was thinking about doing a slide in here of some outsider artists who just completely built a world and did not try to create art, and in doing so, made absolutely amazing works that were not stories, that were not plot based. But that is absolutely a side thing here and a outlier for sure. We're looking for novels in this case. Flow state is the goal. So, flow in positive psychology, also known as being in the zone or locked in, is the mental state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized, focused, full involvement, and enjoyment of the process. In essence, flow is characterized by the complete absorption of what one does and in resulting transformation in one's sense of time. Have you been working on this for 20 minutes or 3 hours? Who knows? The state of finding a balance between a skill and how challenging the task is it? And I'm not going to attempt to say this author's name, but I have read part of his book, Flow, and it's very interesting to say you need to be challenged, but not too much. And finding where that is for you is a very interesting process, and it's very individual. Flow is used as a coping skills for stress and anxiety and productivity measured as a form of leisure that matches one's skill set. The more you practice something, the better you get at it, the easier it is to become into it, to get into a flow state. So this was first presented in the 1975 book Beyond Boredom and Anxiety. Flow, that's the title of it, is the particular book that I have by this psychologist. His name is very Hungarian, I believe. I might be Czech, and I'm totally not going to try to pronounce that. But this concept has been widely referred to across a variety of fields and is becoming much more accepted as something that is both observable and predictable for sure. This flow state shares many characteristics with hyperfocus. However, hyperfocus is not always described in a positive light. I'm going to put Nikola Tesla up on the screen right here, and oh, an adorable pigeon. Because towards the end of Tesla's life, he was obsessed with the pigeon and referred to him as his wife. She lived outside of his window in New York City, and while he did not work on any scientific discoveries for the last 20 years of his life, he was absolutely devoted to his pigeon. Let's call that an extreme example of hyperfocus. Some other examples might include spending too much time playing video games or becoming pleasurably absorbed by one aspect of a project or task to the detriment of the overall idea. In some cases, hyperfocus can capture a person, causing them to appear unfocused or to start several projects but complete few. This is what we're trying to avoid here. Hyperfocus is often mentioned in the context of autism, schizophrenia, and ADHD, conditions that have consequences on attentional abilities. We can learn to use how these different mental states can be beneficial while recognizing that letting them go on their own can be detrimental. The individuality of the concept of flow suggests that each person has their subjective area of flow where they would function best given a situation. One is most likely to experience flow at moderate levels of psychological arousal, as one is unlikely to be overwhelmed but not understimulated to the point of boredom. I liken it to, I guess because I work in a restaurant, a kitchen that is flowing very well. When time just goes incredibly fast and you can burn through a 5 hour service, dinner service, and the time when you make the first dish to go out feels 20 minutes away from the last one. but you're just completely absorbed in your work and breaking down these small tasks and working as a team. This is happening inside your brain instead of a group of humans working together, but that's another example. And everything is pushing together to make a product by the end because everybody or every part of your brain knows where and when to do their task. That's flow, and it feels amazing. If you've ever been in a kitchen and one that functions well, it is quite an invigorating feeling. So I'm going to finish this off with just a nice old sundial saying Carpe Diem from Rome. Absolutely. We want this flow to happen, and I want to hear some examples from y'all, and I'll check out the chat as well for sure and see what examples of flow have you experienced. Have you been stymied by either having too many ideas or being obsessed with one idea and unable to kind of push forward through that? And thank you guys for coming to Writer's Lunch today. Absolutely.
So, Sean, I have a question for you because I
Yeah.
always have questions. And if anybody in the chat has questions, please go ahead and ask them. Do you think that you have learned by trial and error for some of this? Are there things that you wish you had known when you first kind of started your creativity journey? Um, that I'm pretty sure you put everything in here, but were there mistakes you made, and how did you kind of rebound after you made those mistakes?
Um, I think I made two or three board games when I was a kid. I where I had read The Lord of the Rings, really loved it. And maybe had like I think there was a deck of cards back in the day that had all the statistics of the different Marvel characters, and so I made cards for all the characters from Lord of the Rings, and I made a game board and everything. And I worked so hard on building this thing, nobody ever played it. I ran out of mental space and ended up putting this away. Another thing as well for sure is trying to push too hard through it when it is difficult. If you are working on a project and you find your mind starting to wander, starting to look for new things, but you're like, no, I have to finish this. NaNoWriMo, this has happened to me as well. And my plot just fell off. To go to Captain Russell's comment in the chat, how do you outline when you don't know how it's going to end? That is perfectly fine to do an outline of the first three quarters of the book or of all the way up to the climax and then deciding what happens there later. It's just breaking it down into little parts so that you can, in this case, do the flow of a novel and hit some of the conventions for sure. And if you find yourself writing that whole thing and fleshing it all out, hopefully that inspiration picks up again later on and gets that final bit through for you. Even if you don't write it, ahead of time for sure. Other examples as well, including in arts and working on things, was getting obsessed with one medium and working on that to the nth degree for sure. And then just switching to a completely different medium, starting over again from as a beginner and not capitalizing on all the work that I had done previously in a different medium, which in this case can be related to a story, a novel, a world building exercise. Susan, why is there a cockroach in the bed? That's from Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Definitely a neurodivergent and agoraphobic of Prague back in the day. And definitely Kafka's an interesting example because he wrote short stories. I bet if he could have, a lot of these would have been expanded into novels. But him writing 10,000, 20,000 word stories was what he was capable of. And he is still remembered today and very much foundational to a lot of literary fiction as well as a lot of genre fiction because his work was so absolutely inspired.
Don't you think that some of these people are geniuses? I mean, I I would rather be considered a genius than neurodivergent. And before anybody yells at me, I just want to say something about autism versus neurodivergent. I'm old, so I remember autism originally was kids who had emotional issues. They couldn't bond with people and they couldn't speak. And that's what autism was. And a whole bunch of other things got loaded into it, and I don't think they belong. So that's just my take on the whole thing. I don't think neurodivergence is autism, and I think that most people who are neurodivergent are geniuses in one way or another. And that's why there's so many ideas. That's why there's um they sometimes have problems even talking to other people that don't understand what's going on with them. Yeah.
Totally understand, Susan. And that was a lot of ideas in it, but let me info dump on both the history of autism, as you say, going back, quite a while, as well as the difference between genius and neurodivergence. As you said, I would rather be considered a genius than neurodivergent. Totally understand. It's going to be results based in terms of being considered a genius for sure. You do have to accomplish something for that. Neurodivergence is just a state of being. Both geniuses and non-geniuses are neurodivergent and neurotypical. It is kind of like two different categories. We're apples and tomatoes here or something. In terms of the history of autism, and as you say, remembering what it used to be in 1943 when it was first recognized, this is due to some work done, I believe, in the 30s and up in the 40s up until then, with some people who were nonverbal. And this does go back for centuries, millennia to people being neurodivergent and being absolutely misunderstood, but or seen as seers or magical in some way. It was finally broken down to be like, this is a difference in the brain. But shortly after being recognized in America in the 40s and 50s, it was tied in with another concept of the frigid mother. And it was said that if your child was autistic, you must have been a very cold mother to your children, and that caused it. So it wasn't about genetics, it was about the environment. These days, we know it is both genetics and environment that can make these tendencies further. But for about 25 years or so, that was the accepted thing. If your child was either nonverbal or unable to kind of emote and relate to others, it was definitely something that was shunned and blamed on the mother. Completely wrong, for sure, as well as the idea of if a mother was neurodivergent, potentially autistic, and was not able to emote very well, they may have come across as frigid to neurotypicals, and therefore that genetic code being passed on to their children and them having a neurodivergence along the way was blamed on them, even though it had nothing to do with their behavior or anything that they could change about themselves. Um, I do hope that it kind of frames it a little bit better.
Yeah,
I
and our medical system stinks. So, I mean, things aren't seen for what they are. And I know of a doctor who cures the type of autism, that original type of autism, with children by doing heavy metal detox and curing Lyme and other kinds of illnesses like that. And they become like regular children and start talking and have
So
emotional contact with their
I
parents.
understand where you're coming from, Susan. And one of the things that we see is people who are misdiagnosed as autistic. And so these cures for autistic children are actually cures for a different condition that mirrors autism and can be cured. And I know this wasn't to get into this kind of thing, but when you find a person who was able to be cured because they had Lyme disease as a baby somehow, or they've had heavy metal toxicity, they may have similar symptoms, but it's very different than autism, which we do have genetic lineages for, and we've not lineage, but we can find stuff in the DNA, we can find stuff in MRIs that shows differences. There are things that can be done. There are regimens for therapy that can help improve symptoms, but it doesn't go away.
Well, the heavy
Um,
metals get passed down through the pregnancy into the baby. So,
right. The difference between heavy metal poisoning and autism
So,
are
well,
vast. So
okay,
one of
let
the
me
other things that I want to point out
behave
is that
exactly the same.
neurodivergence isn't necessarily just ADHD and autism, over even though those are the ones that are more famous. So when you have any sort of neurodivergence, you can have sensory differences that can also cause you to have other symptoms and other issues with executive function. Dyslexia, dysgraphia, and all those things are technically neurodivergence too, and can impact your ability to interact with the world the same way everybody else does. And so I think what Sean has been sharing with us can be helpful in those case situations, but also in ones for people who are neurotypical and are undergoing situations when they're under a lot of stress or have time limitations at whatever stages they are in life. So
Well, I was just going to say
I
that
would like
same thing
I would
that the tips are good for anyone.
so
which goes as
Sean,
well to the idea, sorry, Shannon, to cut step on your words, which goes to the idea as well that when these things were not diagnosed does not mean they did not exist. And so moving on into the 21st century and these things being diagnosed a lot does not mean that boomers, Gen X, silent generation were not autistic, ADHD. It was just said it was something else. And so if you find yourself having some of these tendencies, it does not mean you need to have a diagnosis. If you are obsessively about an idea, if you're able to be inspired by things that seem sideways, dysgraphia, as Shannon said, if you're seeing the world in a different way, you might be able to pick up on other things that a neurotypical is not able to because you're seeing the world in a different way. In your generation, Susan, it is definitely much more possible that these kind of symptoms would have been pushed away and diagnosed as something else and told that you have to cover them up in order to live in society. Therefore, 40 years later, the idea of all these people are autistic or all these people are ADHD, that's crazy. Frankly, it was the same back then. It was just we didn't have the words for it yet.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I don't think anybody is neurotypical. I think that the people who are neurotypical have blended into society in the way that society wanted them to, better than the people who are considered neurodivergent. I
They're
don't,
out there. They're out there. It happens.
yeah,
so
I have never met anyone who is neurotypical ever.
I have. They're nice people. But Sean, I did I did have a few other questions. Can you discuss if there's, other ways that you can help get yourself motivated by chance? How do you find cheerleaders or community, or other people who are writing to be, accountability buddies? Are there other things that you can do that maybe are a little bit more external to motivate you than what we think about, when we lose steam?
Um, so that incubation period, don't ever feel ashamed of it. That's the first thing to say is if you are feeling depressed personally or about your project and they feel related or whatever, it is perfectly part of the process. And in art therapy, this is much more taught, and to artists, this is much more taught than to writers. But that is part of the process, and you really may just want to eat Oreos and watch Friends again, all 17 seasons. I don't know how many there are. That is perfectly normal. The other thing to say as well is if you are able to, as I've mentioned, try to publish, to putting things out there in terms of fan fiction and stuff like that. Three, building towards a community of writers that you share things with. Hat tip to a science fiction fantasy meetup in Houston. We're going to try and put together a couple of experimental groups and see if people want to start my critique groups along the way, because it is very difficult to meet people, and it is very difficult to meet people who want to talk about writing and not info dump all about your story immediately, which is not very good for conversation. So, hello, how are you? I like that sweater is better than, let me tell you about the galactic planet of Exelia, which, by the way, has existed for 10,000 years and is the reason why the Egyptian pyramids were built. You need to slow roll into these social situations, and it's very difficult for neurodivergent for sure. So, in the case of the science fiction fantasy meetup, in the case of going to comic book conventions as well as writing conventions and stuff like that, you want to take baby steps. You want to bite towards that social aspect and know that all of this is practice. Any social interaction that does not go well, it is perfectly fine. It is practice for the one that finally kicks off something. It's just, it's not something to be discouraged about. There is no failure in the neurotypical world of social interactions.
Well, great. If anybody else has questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. And then Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about, or give a little teaser about what you might be talking about next week when we do our 2025 literary and publishing world gossip slash Kisme beat up?
For sure. I'll be watching the chat on that. And Shannon, if you have any ideas, thoughts on your all my creative process, would totally love to hear it. Or Ryan, absolutely. Um, the biggest scandal for me of the past year has been basically the deletion of NEA funds. And National Endowment for the Arts has gone through a massive overhaul and has completely shut down a ton of different things, including PBS, very, very visibly, but a lot of other smaller things. It has taken months and now a year for these situations to start to trickle down, because the NEA gives funds to states. States give funds to municipalities. Here in Houston, the Houston Arts Alliance gives out grants to artists, writers, and nonprofits. We're watching that all dry up. And so we're looking at a whole bunch of creative endeavors that are going to lose their funding very shortly as time goes on, and it's going to change into a philanthropic model for sure. On top of that, we're kind of looking at my literacy rates in the U.S. going down, and it's very interesting to see as these literacy rates are going down, the creatives, and the foundational, programming and stuff, especially for adults, but happening to children as well. This creative writing going away again and again and again in little ways. I so that's my thing. And as just tossed in the chat, the massive theft of novels by Anthropic and all of the AIs out there will 100% be on the docket for next week as well.
Yeah, I don't want to give all my secrets up, and Sean will also go deeper into the situation that he's talking about and what we could possibly do to help. But I am going to do a deep dive both into the legal situation of the Anthropic trial or court case, and then also the ramifications in other places and issues that have sort of been revealed in the publishing industry around this that are tertiary but insane. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It may be a little sad too, because there have been some crappy things that have happened, but we'll talk about what we can do looking into 2026 to try to make things better. So that's what we're going to discuss, and we'll have the rest of the Tomeworks crew up to talk. And again, bring your tea as well, and we'll talk all about it. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming today. I hope you've learned a lot. Sean, thank you for putting this presentation together. And